Welcome back to the Spatial Connection, the podcast where we explore the fascinating journeys of geospatial professionals and dive into the incredible ways location-based technologies are shaping our world. I'm your host, Kelly McGee, and today's guest is Steve Kasten. Steve's interest in the geospatial industry was sparked back when he was in high school in a world geography class. Since then, he's learned about geodesy, cartography, and photogrammetry. Join me as we listen to Steve and learn about his journey and learn a little bit more about the science of photogrammetry. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today I've got Steve Kasten. Steve worked for Surdex. Me and Steve go way back, a long time. We were just talking about that, how long it's been since we've known each other and some stories that we've shared over the years. I think Steve's going to be able to have an interesting conversation with us here because he's going to be able to talk about how he got into the geospatial industry, not particularly the GIS, even though you do work with GIS in areas. It's really more of I see photogrammetry more of that geospatial in general. Mm-hmm. And from there, we're going to talk about how you got started. What got you into that direction? Where did you get, your inspiration to go that way for an industry as a career? And then what we'll go from there is kind of how you moved through different jobs, what led you from one job to the next job, some of the key maybe projects, skill sets that you learned along the way. And then we'll just kind of have fun with it from there. And
all right.
Afterwards, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the photogrammetry industry in general. So with that, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. How did you get started in photogrammetry?
Photogrammetry, okay. I started out as a cartographer. I had a high school world geography teacher show a film strip, very high technology, an analog film strip, on map making at USGS. And cartography seemed to be interesting to me. They kind of showed it that old technology, plane table surveying and map drawing. So I looked for a program in cartography, and SIU Edwardsville had a program. Ended up getting a BS in Earth Science and Cartography from SIU Edwardsville. So that was my undergraduate degree. I happened to have an instructor, Dr. Thompson.
Oh, Dr. Thompson, yes.
Yeah, he said, Defense Mapping Agency at that time would hire cartographers from Edwardsville. So that became my career path.
Well, that was one of the two areas for SIU at that time when you did the geography, or back then the Earth Science program, is going from you were either going to be a teacher or you're going to work for Defense Mapping at the time.
Defense Mapping Agency. They were hiring everybody. So at Edwardsville, in the back of the cartography lab, they had this big beast of an instrument, and it was a Kelch plotter, an old analog plotter. Nobody used it for anything, but it was used for photogrammetry. So I decided I wanted to go to graduate school, get a photogrammetry degree, but I didn't want to pay for it. So
nobody does.
Dr. Thompson told me that the government, if you went to the Defense Mapping Agency after being there 2 years, they would send you to graduate school. So that was my plan. Along the way, I went to work for another professor. He had an internship with the Bureau of Land Management for the Illinois Coal Mine Subsidence Program.
Really?
So I did an internship there. Anyway, we would go to places where they had just started the Illinois Coal Mine Subsidence Insurance Program. So he was the professor I worked for, was the director at that time. They would have people call in and say, hey, my house is subsiding. So we would go out and run a level run around the building with the assumption that the building was level once. And determine how much out of level it was, which direction it was going, and we had a digital tilt meter that we would glue ceramic tiles on the foundation, and we would monitor the foundation. So we would do these surveys every 6 months or so. So I did that for 2 years, which was a fun and interesting first job, and we'd write reports on every house to determine which direction they were going.
So this was after you had graduated?
This is while I was a junior and senior at Edwardsville.
Okay.
So it was I thought it was just silly, part-time, 12 hours a week employment. But the real benefit, which I was unaware of at the time, became that I basically got 2 years of federal government experience. So when I went to the Defense Mapping Agency with the idea of going to graduate school in 2 years, they took my part-time work for the Bureau of Land Management as 2 years of experience, so I immediately was able to start taking courses at Washington University in photogrammetry, least squares adjustment, geometric geodesy. They were all taught by senior employees at the Defense Mapping Agency, so I was able to meet people like Bobby Linkowski, Sandra O'Connell, who were geometric geodesists or photogrammetrists that had experience, in the profession. So once I was at Defense Mapping Agency, taking classes at Washington University, I applied for a program they had called long-term full-time training.
So at WashU, you were still working?
I was still working. So again, because the government had they had a program where they would pay for your classes, I was able to I took 12 hours a semester at Washington University at night while I worked full time.
Oh, wow.
And so getting a lot of prerequisites and just taking classes like Fortran or calculus-based physics that I didn't have as a prerequisite for graduate school. And then when I went to long-term training, they sent you to Purdue, which I didn't even know where Purdue was, which is shocking, considering how much I like it today. But it was somewhere out there in Indiana. I was able to go to school full-time then, and they paid TDY for a housing allowance, and
that's an awesome benefit.
No, it was a great benefit. It was a great program. One of the things I found out is that I was kind of on the tail end of that in 1998 or 99. The government kind of stopped doing that activity, and now they're seeing that there's not a lot of geodesists around anymore, and it's actually considered NGS considers it a crisis, that nobody wants to go into that profession.
Really?
But the government used to stimulate that through these programs, and they stopped doing it in the late 90s. And so now as NGS is trying to start a new, establish new datums, come out with a new national datum, there's not a lot of people around that understand geodesy
There's
very well.
probably not a lot of, it's one of those industries that a lot of people are not aware of. So, I think students to find it is going to be kind of hard sometimes.
Sure. And a lot of the programs like Purdue had geodesy. Ohio State was a big geodesy program. There are fewer and fewer students, but it's fundamental to GPS and everything we do. And that's where when you start talking about GIS and datums, projections, and units, and geoids, and ellipsoid height, all the things that we do every day when we turn on a GPS receiver, it's fundamental and it's built into that. But you have to understand it when you start processing the data.
It's like a lot of things, there's variables, but if you don't know how to set these settings to manage those parameters,
I mean,
it's going to give you a different result.
As simple as I'm a surveying technician and I have a UAV and I'm doing real-time kinematic positioning with it. What does that really mean? Where does my base receiver need to be, and why does it maybe need to be over a known point? And then when I process it, what projection, what datum, what geoid, and there's many different vintages of that and variations, and those are all things you have to know that go way beyond a lot of times what you learn in the classroom.
A lot of math in there.
Yeah, a whole lot of math.
So how long was the program there while you were out there at Purdue?
I did 2 years at Washington University, and then at Purdue, I was a 1-year program at Purdue.
Wow. That's not a bad deal.
No, it was awesome. It was great, and I intended to continue to work for the federal government. One of the flaws that they had in their system, and maybe now, looking back, it may have been that they were starting to wind down on their long-term training program. When I came back, I got the job that I had before I left, and there really wasn't a lot. There wasn't a promotion or a lot of assignments that used the skill sets that I had learned. So in about 6 months, I determined that I needed to go do something else that would be way more stimulating. And in graduate school, I was introduced to Dr. Bob Ballou, Ray Helmering, Marshall Faintish.
Oh, really? You knew Ray from there?
Yeah, who were the founders of Trifid Corporation, the system engineering group that the guys that had left Defense Mapping Agency. So I called up Ray and said, I'd love to come to work for you, and he thought it was a good fit. So I went to work there and worked there for 7 years.
Wow. That's some history there.
Yeah. And those guys, also Lou Dacker, I mentioned geodesy. Lou Dacker he didn't have his PhD, but he was an Ohio State geodesist, and he and Bob Lou worked on the GPS from its origins, and were very, very knowledgeable geodesists, and they were great. They were great mentors for me in my professional path.
There's a lot of technology that we take for granted the thought and the design process to get it to that point.
Oh, sure.
It's crazy.
I mean, talking with Bob and Lou, these gentlemen, were around, from World War II on, and they always joked with GPS that someday, because they knew the Russians had a similar, technology, but it was the Cold War, and they would joke, oh, someday we're going to sit down with the Russians and we'll talk about these technologies. Lo and behold, they had no idea. Today, with a GNSS receiver, we're processing GLONASS and GPS together, and these two technologies are utilized in one place. It's crazy. Yeah, just crazy.
So you go back to NGA, or no, defensive mapping for the time,
at that time.
And so now you're looking for a new challenge, right?
New challenge, a new technology. It was great going to work at Trifid. They were basically working as a system engineering and technical assistance contractor. So we did a lot of special projects for the Defense Mapping Agency.
What time frame was this year-wise?
1990.
Okay.
Because my oldest son was born. My wife was going to kill me. Pregnancies were considered a pre-existing condition. So while she was pregnant, I decided to change jobs, and so the birth of my oldest son, who's now 34,
wow,
was not covered by insurance. So the Marshall and Ray actually covered the cost of the birth as part of my employment package. Yeah, so that was pretty cool benefit, and to get me to come to work for them.
So what were you doing at Trifid when you were there?
Most of my assignments were about image positioning. Babalu was a character. He was probably the Ed McHale called him the most practical photogrammetrist he had ever met, and I would agree with that. Bob had a program. He was all about positioning of imagery data sets, basically photogrammetric error propagation. And on the military side of things, that is, how well can I determine a coordinate from a video system, a film-based system, a digital system, an interferometric radar, maybe a SAR, and the ultimate goal in that is to be able to drop an ordnance and destroy an enemy in the right place. So Bob worked on that aggressively, and I kind of became his, he was my mentor. I was kind of his first lieutenant and followed him around and learned an incredible amount about how to position, how to derive coordinates from just about any imaging system or any measurement system that was flying around, whether it was a satellite or a reconnaissance plane. The last thing I worked on was the Predator, and
oh wow!
From the video cameras and the Predator, we were able to derive coordinates. Then apparently the CIA put Hellfire missiles on it, and then they blew things up. Yeah.
So you just had to be somewhat close.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to think the technology, what it allows you to do, and the math and the thought process to be able to support that. That's just wild.
One of the things I didn't mention about my time at Edwardsville, it's interesting, we're sitting here in the shadow of the university, but I really didn't like mathematics. That's why, and cartography at that time was graphic based mostly, line charts, Leroy lettering, pen sets, you're drawn by hand.
Right.
So I decided to go back and take some remedial math. Well, after college algebra, trigonometry, calculus, linear algebra, differential equations, I suddenly had a minor in mathematics. Wasn't intended.
I did the same.
Yeah, but by doing that, I ended up in a position where, doing photogrammetric calculations, linear algebra was easy and became part of my career path.
That was a class. I didn't understand it when I took it. And then I got into geography and image processing. I was like, oh, I should have paid attention to that class.
Yeah.
So now you're Triffid. How long were you there before your, I guess, next?
I was in Triffid for 7 years, and it was a very enjoyable, it was very exciting program. They started to run out of work at that time. It made sense to look for another direction. So I had been working, strictly with Department of Defense career path for 15 years, 16 years, and so I started looking around. Who else does photogrammetry? I found Surdex.
Yeah, because that's kind of a limited industry.
It's very narrow. We'd also decided we wanted to stay in St. Louis, so it definitely, at that time, you could go to Colorado, you could go to the East Coast, you could go to the West Coast, to the big defense contractors, and I looked at some of those. But in St. Louis, there was Walker Associates and Surdex, which were, two relatively small, family-owned,
Right.
traditional aerial photography companies. So I contacted Rick Hoffman. We sat down, and the interesting thing was he was very interested in transitioning from analog, film-based photogrammetric techniques to digital, and I had just worked on that transition inside of NGA. So
wow. So timing was
It
perfect.
was a great fit. Yeah.
So then you went to Surdex at that
So I
point?
went to Surdex at that time. I was a project manager and did their aerial triangulations. They had a surveyor on staff at that time, and I was a young guy, and he realized that he was never going to become a licensed surveyor because in the state of Missouri and most states you have to work under a licensed surveyor to get your experience, and we didn't have one. So he left, and when he left, I inherited the Z12,
okay.
so 12-channel GPS receiver, that we were using to fly airborne GPS flights, and started the ground surveying activity in the surveying group at Surdex, as well as doing project management.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so how long did you do that before it was
I did that for
got an itch or whatever to move?
I did that for a few years, and bumped into a startup company called Image America, and they had a fledgling digital camera, and they put it in a funky airplane called the Beechcraft Starship, which was a composite airplane with two rear engines. So I went to work for them, and they struggled a little bit as a company, so I only stayed there about a year. But they eventually sold their camera and their technology to Google, and then that technology became the cameras that are now used by Google Earth in a couple different variations. And
So there's some sound technology there.
it was sound technology. It was initially based on an old panoramic film-based camera. They just put a digital backplane in it, but the gentleman Kevin Reese that was at Google working that has several patents on different cameras that they use today.
Wow.
To fly and generate a lot of the Google Earth imagery that's used.
Nothing else. It's kind of neat to be able to work
It
on.
was neat to be part of that and to see that technology start up and grow. So from there, I went to work for Sanborn, which was another small or a national company, I guess. They had purchased Walker Associates in St. Louis and 7 other companies, and they created a national photogrammetric company. So I worked in the office in St. Louis and eventually was the manager of that office.
So you kind of got to move yourself up a little bit there.
Yeah, we had some transition. The gentleman that was running the office moved on to a sales role at Sanborn, so I took over the office, and we had about 30 people doing photogrammetric projects throughout the Midwest. It was a fun time. A lot of transition to digital photogrammetry. We first started with scanners, and then we moved into a digital camera.
So that probably put you more in a management type role full time, I think, then.
That was
so much
a little
technical,
bit of both.
was it?
Yeah, I still managed some of our survey guys, but it was managing the people in production as well as the business side of sales.
Now, had you done the sales part when you were at Surdex as a project manager, or was this kind of an intro into that?
I had done some sales activity at Surdex, shortlist presentations, writing proposals. So it was kind of a natural extension of that
Okay.
to grow into that.
And how long were you there?
I was at Sanborn for 4 years.
That was a good
Yeah.
amount of time, if I remember right.
It was a good amount of time. Yeah.
And then it was time to change again.
Yeah, it was time. Well, Sanborn, so because they were acquiring companies and then they had transitions of consolidated companies, so they started to consolidate. It looked like they were going to close the St. Louis office, which they eventually did.
Right.
So as I saw that happening, I contacted Rick Hoffman at Surdex again because it was about a half a block down the street.
Right. They were really
They're
close.
close at Spirit Airport.
Yes.
So I talked to Rick, and we came to an agreement that I would come back. So I went back to Surdex and took a role as a project manager again, doing project management work and surveying.
Yeah, and you've been there since then, haven't you?
So I've been there, yeah, since about 2003. So
Wow.
22 years. Yeah,
That's kind of crazy to think about that.
yeah, that's a long time.
You know, as we talk about your path here, you know, like Image America, there, it was a year. While you're there, a year sounds like a long time.
Yeah,
And now you look back, it was like a short amount of time.
it was a very short amount of time.
And I think, you know, one of the things I think hopefully listeners can take from that is even those jobs that are short amount of time, you can get some value out of that. And, you know, it's if you get an opportunity to work for someplace, don't just go there. I think even if it's not the ultimate place that you're going to work, you can still be productive and also, you know, get some value that's going to increase your value as an employee.
Oh, sure. I worked for a gentleman, Pankaj Desai, at Sanborn, and he's a mentor too, and a friend. And Pankaj always said, "Don't be adverse to risk." My father told me never leave a federal government job, so he died when I left the federal government, because a lot of people are comfortable in that kind of a role, and I could have stayed there and retired in my mid-50s.
There's a lot of secure job security there.
Huge security in that, but from a technically challenge and a growth basis, I think I would have been very frustrated and limited in staying there. So taking the risk, doing something silly like leaving Surdex what some people would perceive as silly, going to Image America, was a great opportunity. I experienced a lot of things that I would never imagined I would have experienced. I saw what happens in a startup, the risk that people are really taking. You know, when an investor comes in and says, "Where's my money? What did I get for this?" But those are all things that are beneficial, and are kind of help you with your growth in your professional career.
And at that time, it probably, you didn't think you were still early in your career. You felt like you were probably
Oh, yeah.
along the way. But now looking back on it, you know, that is one of those opportunities you need to take in that stage of your life, because it really fuels where you go further
Oh,
down the
sure.
line.
It's very, yeah. They're formative, and they're experiences that you can look back and say, you can learn how to do things. You can learn how to not do things. It just depends on how those experiences go. We had a program at Surdex with the Army where I maintained my security clearance, and we phased out of it about 6 months ago. And I went back and looked. So for 45 or 43 years, I had a top secret compartmented DoD clearance from the time I started at NGA till about 6 months ago. It's pretty amazing that to have 43 years of continuous service to the Department of Defense in different all kinds of different roles. And I poked some of the guys like Tim Nagy at Triffin. I'm like, "Can you believe it's been 43 years?" And he had just retired. He goes, "Mine was 45." But it was a big part. It's been a big part of my career, and I definitely learned a lot when I was doing just DoD activities. But the security clearance is a valuable thing if you're going to go that path of clear jobs.
I truly believe the same. And, you know, it's one of the things when you're, especially for students or those that are early in their career, a lot of people don't think about those aspects. You know, the choices you make now can really impact you later, whether you
sure.
can get that, because even today, a lot of these jobs, especially in the geospatial industry, and when we talk about geospatial, you know, I come more from the GIS side where you're more the photogrammetry side, but they all work together. And, you know, a lot of these jobs are tied to government programs because they are big consumers of that technology. And so there's a lot of opportunity, you know, and everybody needs to be able to think about that bigger picture. And it also, to me, it's one of the things when you're planning out what kind of classes do you take. You know, you were mentioning it before, is like you had to go back and do some math
Oh, yeah.
to take you to that next level. You don't think about how math plays into geospatial, but it still does. You know, even if you're not doing the math, you need to understand what's going on there.
Well, today I give our technicians grief sometimes, but you know the GPS receivers are so user friendly. You know, you push a button and it flashes red, and then it flashes green, and life is good. But to know why I need a certain number of satellites and why I need a certain, why it's not appropriate to go walk next to a chain link fence.
Oh, yeah.
Or under power lines or next to a building are all important things to understand that go way beyond just turning the instrument on. You know, why not using satellites on the horizon when in post processing is probably a good idea.
Not just because they're told to do so.
But because there's a ton more atmospheric issues there, so you're going to get a solution, but it'll be noisy.
Yes.
But all these things that you have to understand just to use the equipment successfully to get accurate results.
Well, Steve, I think we kind of got you to where you're at these days. So you're focusing a lot on the projects themselves? Do a lot of that?
So my role as Surdex, I kind of wear two hats. Officially, I'm the Vice President of Business Development. I have some specific clients that I serve. One of the things that happened along the way professionally, I became more and more involved with the surveying side of things. So I'm a licensed land surveyor in 6 states.
Oh, wow.
And one in particular, a photogrammetric land surveyor. Florida is an area that we work. We do a lot of projects in it, Surdex/Bowman. So as a licensed land surveyor, I'm the surveyor of record for those projects. So I do marketing and sales to those clients. We do about 8 to 9 orthophoto and mapping projects of entire counties every year in Florida.
That's a lot.
That's
a lot of ground to cover.
It's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of clouds coming off the ocean and imagery to acquire. But so I do some project management, a lot of sales to those. And I've had the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as a client in the St. Louis district for 20 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
That's a task order contract, and we do a lot of work for the Corps of Engineers. So I do the sales and kind of program management for the Corps of Engineers as well.
Okay.
And still help out with the final processing and signing off on any of the surveys that we do in the states that require that.
So I'd like to take a little time here. You know, a lot of times when we go through these interviews, we kind of just talk about people's career, but we're going to transition it a little bit. I think this is very important because for a lot of listeners, they don't know what, if you're in GIS, there's not a guarantee that you're going to know what photogrammetry is. Mm-hmm. I know when I started in GIS, it wasn't until, I'd probably been doing it for a little bit of time, but then it's like we got these ortho photos, and I'm like, what's that? What is that? Let alone, how did they become ortho photos? Mm-hmm. So if you can, maybe you can kind of help fill in some of the gap, and we'll talk about what is photogrammetry, and maybe, we don't have to get into the deep math and everything else like that, but let's kind of, what makes them different from a photograph?
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you for that.
All right. So, the technical definition, photogrammetry is the art and science of making measurements from photos. So it's all about the measurement science of photography. Today, it goes beyond that to, geospatial technology, but I actually looked, because I always make this reference. If you look at a regular surveying textbook, they run about 800 pages. Photogrammetry is one of 19 chapters, and it's about 20 pages out of 800 that a surveyor. So a surveyor that comes out with an advanced education in surveying will only study photogrammetry maybe 5% of the time in his coursework. So we always say we're the stepchild of surveying, but it's a very precise science. And what we do is we take a photograph that has built-in distortions from the lens, from atmosphere, from the relief on the ground, and we remove those displacements and make it map-like. Orthophotography is nothing more than a photo that's corrected so we can make accurate measurements in X and Y, which is why they many times become the base layer for any further mapping, whether you want to. So once it's corrected, I know I have known coordinates with constant scale in X and Y, so I can digitize roads, I can digitize buildings, or I could overlay parcel lines and make it part of a GIS information system used by county assessors.
I know one of the things I found very interesting when I first learned about photogrammetry was the ability, like you mentioned, it's not just your XY, but in your Z, the elevation side, that you can actually get very accurate elevations from this process.
Yeah, so one of the neat things about photogrammetry is over the last probably 20 years, it started to be kind of blasé and get replaced by LiDAR for measuring elevations. But then the UAV craze came along, and with that, a lot of GIS technicians and surveying technicians were flying UAVs and suddenly taking imagery and measuring heights again. Mm-hmm. So photogrammetry's had this big resurgence because it's a very high quality functional tool that from a UAV you can make very precise elevation data sets, more precise than we can from an airplane, with a small inexpensive $2,000-$3,000 UAV device. But by merging the photos together, matching them appropriately, and then with tools like Edgesoft or
like the
Pix4D.
Oh, Pix4D, yes.
Pix4D software, you can measure X, Y, and Z locations at a density that goes beyond what you could do with a LiDAR system.
I think one of the things you mentioned there is kind of interesting when you talk about mosaic and images and stitching images together. Can you kind of talk about how that plays into creating the final product?
What Kelly's talking about is when we first started talking, I was remembering OrthoCork, which was a tool in the late 90s and we had to have a photo that covered the product size. We were doing map sheet photography, and then we would just rectify that individual map sheet or photo into one map sheet. As we moved into digital photogrammetry, we had the ability to merge multiple photos into one map sheet. So we suddenly were able to fly in the most efficient way that we could, and then cut a photo out of 1, 2, 3 tens of photos. Initially, that was all done manually, kind of like in graphically, you tear the edges of a photo and slide them together. So digitally, you put a cut line in and pick which photo you use.
Where it'll have the least amount of impact.
The least amount of impact, the least amount of distortion. The tendency in ortho photos is people look at linear features. So if a seam line goes between over a building, a railroad track, or a road, if there's any horizontal shear, it'll be seen. So we move the cut lines around those. Today we use automated tools to do the first cut line, and then the technicians go in and review them and move them appropriately. So it's basically in a CAD-based piece of software where you can actually grab the nodes and move them to a different location, and the photo is rectified on the fly, so you can see the results right there. And if you don't like it, you move the seam line back. But now we fly the aerial photography independent of where the map sheets are, and we merge multiple photos together because there's things like smoke, shadows off of the buildings or vegetation, or moving cars that we have to try and seam out of the final mosaic so they're the most visually appealing.
So what type of elevation are you flying when you
So traditionally we had fixed elevations because our film-based cameras had 6-inch focal lengths, and everybody was real happy with that. Occasionally we'd use a shorter 3.5-inch focal length or so. But today it depends on what digital camera you're using.
Oh, wow.
Some of them have 100 millimeter focal length. Some of them have a 150 millimeter focal length. So we was talking about math earlier. I use algebra every day in what I do, to determine what altitude we're going to fly. We know the pixel size on the camera array. We know the final resolution that we're looking for, maybe half a foot resolution. So I know the focal length of the camera, and I can solve by similar triangles how high I have to fly to get that resolution. And so it might be 5,000 feet, it might be 10,000 feet. We do a lot of work at Bowman for the the NAPE program for the USDA, and we'll fly at 27,000 feet, higher altitude, lower resolution photography.
So when you're flying those, do you stay at a constant altitude, or
We
do
try
you
and
follow the elevation?
Yeah, we try and stay at a constant altitude as we fly those. We do projects like in Utah or Colorado where there's mountain ranges involved, and we'll fly at a constant altitude and then break lines, and then fly at a higher altitude for the mountainous regions.
Interesting. So I think when we're talking about that 3D, the elevation that you're gathering, that takes you beyond just creating an orthophoto. Sometimes there's other products that you can create from this. So you can, I know from the time when I worked Surdex and stuff, you guys can actually calculate volumes. There's a lot of information that you can gather through these techniques.
Yeah, civil engineering activities for volume calculations, contouring for drainage analysis. FEMA, we do a lot of work where we collect elevation data from LiDAR sensors for entire counties or entire states, and FEMA uses that for flood modeling and flood analysis. So the ability to measure not only the position of something, but its height is key to the use of, it goes beyond photogrammetry. I'll call it, geomatics or geospatial technology today, because we're combining LiDAR systems with imagery systems to do that process.
That's kind of crazy. To think, from probably the early days of photogrammetry, if you will, to where we're at today, how much it's changed and what you can interact with as far as different systems. I guess, what are some of the big changes that you've seen over the times of photogrammetry, as far as maybe the scales that you're able to capture, the resolutions?
We were talking about computer programming codes earlier offline, and when I started programming, we were using punch cards. So the first GIS system I used at SIU Edwardsville,
We won't describe what a punch
it was
card
graphs, and
Oh, really?
and it was 80 column punch cards. When I started at Defense Mapping Agency, we were editing DTM data with punch cards.
Wow.
You would get a card deck, you would build the card deck, you would submit your run, and the next morning you would get your plot back.
Yes.
Talk about a slow process. Getting a digitizing table was a huge deal to edit contours. That was a big improvement. So the ability today to do everything digitally it's an amazing revolution in the technology of what we do. To give you an idea from a project standpoint, I remember we did a project in Cuyahoga County, so it's Cleveland. Let me think, probably 1997. There was 2 foot contours and orthophotos of the whole county. They gave us 18 months to produce the product. And that was probably 6 or 7 technicians on analytical plotters, digitizing elevation for 2 foot contours and making map sheets. So an 18-month production cycle, and for 2 foot contours countywide, and that was a little over $1 million project.
Wow. In 18 months.
In 18 months. So we had a huge backlog for production. Today, we'll fly a county with LiDAR for maybe $150,000.
Wow.
Produce a product in 45 to 50 days.
That's a pretty quick turnaround.
Very quick. So, like many things in today, it's kind of a soundbite world. Our customers' expectations have gone up with density of data, quality of data, resolution of data, and their production schedules have gone down. I think the big change from the industry side is, it used to be we would have analytical plotters that would cost $100,000 to $150,000, and employees would work on them 24 hours a day sometimes. When I started at the Defense Mapping Agency, we worked 2 weeks of days, 2 weeks of evenings, and 2 weeks of midnights.
Wow.
And that was the rotation, because the analytical plotters always had to have somebody on them because they were so expensive.
Maximize
To maximize the return on that investment and the equipment. Today, we don't have that expensive of equipment in the office, but it's up in the airplane. We have $1 million LiDAR and a $600,000 digital camera in a $1 million airplane, so a couple $1 million flying around, and a lot of that data is produced right off of the sensor system. We post-process the GPS orbit and we clean up the LiDAR data. So that cost of operation has been moved to the aircraft.
And I would assume the ability to store the information that you're collecting has changed drastically over the years.
Huge. I saw a floppy disk the other day, a 3.5-inch floppy disk.
What?
Yeah. I remember when there was the turbo, and then the super floppy disk,
Yes.
a meg or 2 megs. Yeah, storage continues to improve. The capacity of storage continues to improve. Cloud-based computing. A lot of things are stored on the cloud. We have a huge terabytes and terabytes of data online at the office of orthophoto and LiDAR data that's constantly being backed up. It's Murphy's Law. As soon as you expand your storage, it's full. Yes. It seeks. It's like water. It seeks its own level. Whatever you've got.
So I think probably the next question for that is, what is it that you see as far as changing going forward? Do you see any changes coming? Is AI coming into play for the photogrammetry side?
I mean, AI continues to mature. One of the first projects I worked on when I got out of graduate school at the Defense Mapping Agency was autonomous feature extraction. And that was looking at automatically extracting features and the determination at that, we were doing segmentation, finding edges of buildings, building primitives, and then, assigning attribution. And it was so successful. But, that was 1998. The issue with automatic feature detection has always been the false positives. You get a lot of data, but how much is really valid?
And how do you identify and pick that out?
Yeah, and how do you determine that? And, NGA's determination, or DMA's determination at that time is construction is different in Europe and the Southeast Asia and the U.S., so it was basically regionally based, because a lot of the techniques used 90-degree angles to define architecture. Well, that doesn't work in Europe, and it definitely doesn't work in Southeast Asia or Africa. I see the same kind of situation with AI. There's a lot of learning to do specific tasks that's going to go on for feature extraction, and some things will be easy, but also for editing of data. I mentioned that a lot of the cost in operation today for elevation extraction are up in the airplane, but then there's also a part of extracting that information and the back office part of how do you clean. For some users, the most important thing is the bare earth terrain. So how do I get rid of cars, people, cows, houses, trees? And that's where we spend a lot of time today. You have to believe there's going to be an AI technique to use to start, because a lot of that is repetitive. Mm-hmm. Trees are trees, at least in deciduous trees versus conifers, and so there's some algorithms that will start to expedite that. But then for other users, the tops of buildings are important. Cell towers or for our cellular communications, as well as solar panels, or the direction of the elevation of the top of a building, and finding ways to automate the extraction of that information, I think, is going to be valuable down the road.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. That was another aspect of photogrammetry that I thought was interesting, was that you're not just capturing just as you see it, but the way that you can infer and extract out, like you were talking about, bare earth versus tree cover. You can pick out what you need to have as your data set. It's very varied as far as the data that you can pull out of that. And I think AI is going to do like you're talking about. It's going to help those repetitive tasks. Those ones that can say, hey, I can see these patterns. It seems like that's a great task for it. And I see that, just in the last year or so, the change that we've seen in AI, it is tackling so many more projects, more tasks, and types of tasks that it's doing. So I definitely could see that being. I don't know if you guys are exploring AI in your side yet.
Well, I mean, we're starting to look at what applications it will benefit. So it's for us, it's still in the infancy of where it will be valuable. We've got some mature algorithms for doing generic cleaning of LiDAR that work fairly well, but if more we can minimize the human interaction, the more efficient we can be in producing products.
And more, probably consistent as well.
Consistently and also more efficiently. As I mentioned, our customers continue, their schedules keep getting shorter and shorter. So the faster you can produce the data, the quicker they can implement it and make their decisions. And one of the things we've seen from a project standpoint is customers are willing to spend a little bit more money on a project to get it quickly, and then they'll just refresh it at a sooner date. Because they're making decisions, and then they're going to want new imagery, new situation.
I think that's a good point, because you mentioned before how long it would take to get a project done before. And the ability to turn that around quick is, we see events that happen quickly.
Sure.
So you might fly your city, your county, or whatever today, and then we have, like we just recently had, tornadoes go through. And that all change, so you need to be able to have those quick turnarounds. And when you go and capture that data, you've got to be able to get that out there quickly to be able to make good decisions from that.
Yeah, some of the funner projects we've been involved with are fun's probably not the best term, but they're exciting or interesting, are associated with natural disaster, especially working with the Army Corps of Engineers. A lot of it's flooding related along the rivers, and a few years ago, the Corps came to us, and the Missouri River and Mississippi River were in flood stage, and they said, well, we'd like for you to fly, make orthophotos, and then get them to us in 15 days. And I said, why 15 days? And they said, well, that's when the people in the past have been able to get us the data. Well, we had developed an online capability for the USDA where we can post data in 5 days.
Wow.
And using automated techniques to do triangulation and orthorectification. So we flew a large area of the Missouri River and turned it around in 2.5 days for the Corps of Engineers online. Folks that are looking at flood damage could exploit the data, and they were very thankful for that. We've done 3 or 4 more projects for them like that, and so a lot of times they're looking at the crest, but then after the crest, they want to see the damage. So the ability to fly something in a day or two, post the data online in a day or two, is very helpful during storm events. And Surdex has always been very good about helping the community. We flew St. Louis last weekend. We flew the main part of the tornado coverage in downtown St. Louis and put that online within 24 hours for first responders to use, or even the local community to do disaster recovery. So we've got an online orthophoto base out there.
I think that brings an interesting point, is the value of maps. Whether they're a paper map that we have or digital maps, on the web, mapping's still very valuable. It's a useful tool for decision makers, and to be able to update those maps. We look back in times past, how long it took to update a map compared to what we can do today. It's amazing. And I think that one of the fastest ways we get a lot of that when people think about these maps is not always GIS. They think about that orthophoto. They think about something they can look. They might use GIS to access it and do their measurements, but it's the data itself, which is going to come from some photogrammetric source.
Sure.
And that's, I don't know what your outlook as far as the future of the industry, but, we were talking about earlier, is how many jobs can still be available. We need to get more people trained in these industries, these different career paths, because we're going to be a little bit short coming up soon.
Well, yeah, I'd mentioned geodesy. So NGS has determined that the lack of geodesists is really a national problem. And they've got a group of scientists, academic and industry folks looking at how can we get people trained so that we can continue to have the science of geodesy maturing, And, it's fundamental to any positioning system that we have operating
Yes.
GPS. We mentioned UASs a little bit. When UASs came out, they talked about democratizing the photogrammetry industry, and that is really what has happened. And that democratization is just about anyone that's a GIS professional. Most GIS curriculums now have a UAV track or a UAV course. To me, it's a surveyor's tool, so it's in the truck of every surveyor a lot of times. Those individuals need to understand why I fly at a certain altitude, why I fly a certain direction, how many control points do I need, where should the control points be, how do I post-process the data, what data projection coordinate system do I pick, and how much overlap do I need in the photos, because different softwares require different overlap just to make their utilities work.
And I think you identified it greatly. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And you can have a tool, but if you don't put the settings correctly, you're not going to get the best result. So you need to understand that tool. You need to understand how to plan that out and utilize that tool to its best capabilities.
Yeah, and so for a young professional in GIS or in surveying or any geospatial technology, the more you can learn about those foundational disciplines like map projections or geodesy or mathematics, photogrammetry, the more marketable your skill set will be to other firms, to your successful career.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, because I think that our industry as a whole, even GIS, a lot of it, we see the positions, the tasks, I don't know the best way to put it, but they get automated. So people think, well, we're not going to have that job anymore. AI comes out. People are like, well, we're not going to have that job. AI is going to do it. There's still a lot of jobs that are going to be using these tools. AI is a tool that's going to help us get that. But the jobs still exist. Mm-hmm. And there's still that need out there. And I think we also will be getting to a point where there's different ways to apply that. When I started to do GIS, it was just, we're going to make parcel maps. Mm-hmm. I've done so much more than that. And it's amazing, kind of crazy a little bit, the level or the breadth of industries that we can work in and support. And I think photogrammetry is the same way, because you're creating that data that is so valuable to a variety of industry. Emergency, assessors. We can probably go on to a number of different organizations and agencies that utilize the data that you guys produce. And we've talked a little bit about, what could we tell, what could you tell new students or people thinking about it, what to focus on? What would be your advice maybe to, if there's something that stands out? And I guess I'm going to tie it in at the same time, because I'll let you put them together the way you want, is maybe you have a project is there a project that if you look back, it's like, that was a very interesting project within my career, that I used photogrammetry or, a specific technique in there.
I think from an academic, educational background, I never liked mathematics, but I learned to like mathematics, and it was it was very beneficial to me. I would, strongly recommend that you take as much mathematics as you can, because it's fundamental to just about any discipline. It'll serve you well in your profession. From a project standpoint, I've had a client for years. It's Associate Electric Cooperative. Terry Nelson is their GIS manager, and I've worked for her for years. She's a wonderful lady, and she's allowed us to do just all kinds of different technologies and test them. We compute volumes for her. It's a relatively, I call it photogrammetry 101. This is a simplistic project, but along the way we started doing that with film-based aerial photography. Then we did digital aerial photography to derive the elevations. Then we've flown it with a Gatewing UAV, a Phantom 4 UAV, an Anafi UAV. We did terrestrial laser scanning. We did stop-and-go mobile laser scanning. So all these technologies she allowed us to use on our projects, to test them, to see how well they would succeed. We were always able to compare them. Today we do it with a LiDAR and a digital camera in one aircraft, in one pass, and a lot of it's automated. But so for that one client, and we've been doing that for probably 15 to 16 years.
Wow.
But to test these technologies, test them against with the proven technology, and then mature how we're going to do the products. We did a project for her where they wanted to know the amount of ash that was in the bottom of their ash leach ponds. So we put a UAV boat with a sonar on it, a dual frequency sonar that would actually measure the depth of the sediment, and did a DTM of that one. And we flew the DTM outside the ponds with a Phantom 4. So that project combined all kinds of technologies, all kinds of surveying techniques, and continues to be a great a place to kind of stretch our skill set.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I think we'll probably wrap it up here. I think we've given the audience a lot to listen to and some good information. We'll put some contact information for you in the show notes.
Okay.
So if you want to let people know how you can get a hold of you, and we'll share that out there, that'll be available for them. And with that, I greatly appreciate your time and educating us a little bit on this. And we'll talk again in the future.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always fun to go over a career, and I think it's been fun and exciting and a challenge.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us on the Spatial Connection. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. You can also follow us on social media and our website. Do you know someone with a fascinating geospatial story? If so, send us a message. We'd love to hear about them. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep exploring the world through the lens of geospatial technology.